Hi everybody. Again, my name is Hosmer, and it's a huge pleasure to be here. I'm the guy on the right. So hopefully this talk will kind of take what was talked about a little bit beforehand and make this kind of a practical application. So I'm going to give you a history of a very specific thing. So today we're going to be going through talking to a robot, and I actually kind of changed the title here. It actually should be talking through a robot. And that'll make a little more sense towards the end of this. So my background is, for about the past 12 to 13 years, I've been a special effects artist. And so that's more of a traditional special effects artist. I make zombies, I do fine art sculpture, I make creature suits, and animatronic characters. It's a gorilla up in the corner. But I kind of branch into weird things also. I do medical simulation stuff, digital sculpting. I kind of never have a boring job, so it's been a lot of fun. My first experience with Carnegie Mellon, and then specifically the Entertainment Technology Center, was before I was actually a student there. And I was approached in the winter months of 2004, and there was a team called the Interbots Initiative. And their goal was to create an interactive animatronic or robotic character that would reside in the hallways of the ETC, would greet them, the students as they walked by, greet guests, direct them around, tell them the weather. And so I was brought on as the guy to help fabricate this character. And the ETC said, okay, go for it. And that was encouraging. So we started, but we kind of had a question thrown at us, and it was why? Why are you guys doing this? And we knew we wanted to make something a little bit more special than normal. There's been a lot of research in interactive robots and stuff like that, but we all were fans of amusement park attractions, theme park attractions. We totally dorked out in World Showcase with all the animatronic characters of Walt Disney World. But there was one thing that was a bit lacking in those experiences, and it was that if you came back 10 minutes later, the show was the same, and so it became a bit redundant. And Walt Disney was very famous for an approach he would take called plussing, and so the designers would come up with something, and he would say, okay, and what else? And so he would constantly be pushing his designers, and so we really wanted to take this cool robot type thing and push it and plus it just a little bit more, make it interactive. So we started this project solely basing it off of the character. If people are going to want to talk to something, it has to be inviting. It has to be something that people find fun. And so we actually spent a couple weeks designing some characters, and we finally came to this robot character named Quasi. And we picked him for a couple reasons. One, Carnegie Mellon loves robots. That was kind of a duh. So that was almost like a kind of a cheap trick that we pulled on our project. But we picked this robot named Quasi. Now, there were a couple key features about his look that I just wanted to mention. The first was, you'll notice his proportions. So while he's not a fully fleshed out character there, his body proportions are very similar to the way a lot of animators will design a character. If you look at Mickey Mouse, Calvin and Hobbes, Stitch, Jerry from Tom and Jerry, all of these characters have toddler-like proportions, so large head, big eyes, little tiny body, tiny limbs. So it kind of played off the cute factor. In addition to that, we designed Quasi's eyes were light up. They were LED lights. And you can see Quasi's actually, this version of Quasi's on display over here. We designed Quasi to be able to display emotion through color. And we'll get into that a little bit more. And lastly, most robots, at least, I think it was mentioned earlier, but a lot of robots tend to be a bit intimidating because of these hard mechanical objects. So his outside surface design was more of a rolled steel type look, so we wanted the contours to be as soft as possible. Now, we went through that project and we built Quasi and we put him in a kiosk and we put him in the hallway, and it was considered a success. And Quasi autonomously interacted with people. But we needed some motivation for people to want to talk to him. And so if you can see here on the right, behind the screen, we actually have two 25-pound hoppers of candy. And so Matt here is his motivation is to get some Skittles around the house. And it was a very Pavlovian way of approaching this. Everyone was dogs, I guess. So again, we were asked, why? Why did you do this? And so we kind of felt like we had succeeded at this project, but we didn't really, we wanted to create a magical experience, but we couldn't fully define what that was yet. And so throughout that next year, we had used Quasi in building virtual worlds, again with Randy Pausch. We used him in other projects to create some interactions. A full year later, we revisited this Quasi concept, and there was now a large group of students, and we came up with Quasi 2. And we kind of jostled around some things about him, but we focused on two main things. Because I was the guy that was a builder guy, I focused on the fully fleshing out the character, making him have more movements. And then we also wanted to make him mobile, so we could move him around rather than this giant cart. And then we also started to expand on the autonomous layer to his interactions. So this was the beginning of the semester, and pretty early on, we were asked if Quasi could be the mascot of a large children's event that was going to be held in Florida. Thousands and thousands of kids were going to be talking to Quasi. And we immediately realized that Quasi, we didn't want to create awkward moments with a robot. We wanted this to be a really cool experience with this character. So we had to reevaluate this autonomous technology that we had developed. It was actually a very shallow experience because we had only had one semester to do AI. There are people doing AI and it's been for 20 years on it. So we realized that we had to change that. So the solution was puppetry. And so it was kind of funny because we mentioned puppetry and actually some of the techie people actually kind of got a little bit depressed, but hopefully you'll see the value of this. So up here I have a screenshot of the interface that we developed for controlling a robot. And so again, we before had used a computer to create these interactions, now we're using a human brain, and hopefully they can do a good job of creating a compelling character. So just to break down this screen here, we actually have two video feeds up in the top left, and one on the left is actually a camera in Quasi's nose, so we can see what he sees, or smells in this case. And then over on the right-hand side is kind of a wide-angle shot of the entire room. And laid over top of that is an interface where we can actually control his gaze. So as we drag a cursor around in those windows, we can control his head gaze and his body will follow. So that was kind of the basics of controlling a character. Over on the right-hand side, we have a bank of animations. So we had done all of our animations in Maya, exported them from Maya to control a robot, and we were able to queue those up. So in a way, some canned animations to draw from. The really cool thing I like is down here at the bottom, and this is Quasi's emotion map. And right now, you can only see 4, but there's actually 5 different emotions. Happy, sad, embarrassed, confused, and angry. And so what we can actually do is drag the cursor around in that window. That will change the colors of his eyes, but it will also affect the posture and movement of some of those features. So just to give an example, if Quasi's happy, he's going to be green in the eye area. His eyelids would be open, but if we made him angry, he'll squint, angle his eyelids down, and his antennas were actually designed much like dogs' ears. So when they go angry, ears tend to flip back and be very directional. So we kind of used some visual cues there. The interaction was kind of an interesting one. So I've had the opportunity to puppeteer, to be one of Quasi's voices for quite some time now. And, I guess what I wanted to mention is there's different levels of interaction that happen. And so Quasi typically talks to kids, and while that's happening, if it's a toddler or a baby, those kids are going to be have a much simpler method of interaction. So generally what I do with that is I'm just affecting Quasi's colors, and the kids seem kind of drawn to this kaleidoscopic exchange of colors in his eyes and ears. The next age group up would be kind of tweens, and that's where we get to kind of have some fun. So I'm actually engaging the kids with games. I'll tell stories, jokes, things like that. But like my little teapot type stuff. The next level up from that would be teens, and that's where you can have a lot of fun with it. You have to be careful. Kids those guys tend to be a lot more sarcastic, but Quasi can talk some smack, so. He keeps it clean, it's totally clean. Quasi's a 12-year-old little boy, but he can lay it down when he needs to. And then on top, and then the last is adults. And so one of the interesting things that happen with adults is they're usually there with their kids. They tend to be in the back hiding for some weird reason. And they're the ones that Quasi will look at and try to draw them in. And usually that involves making fools of them in front of their kids. So if it's dancing, the mom and dad now are dancing with Quasi, and the kids are laughing at mom and dad. And so we talk to kids of all ages. You might recognize one of those guys. And we also other kids of all ages. So the level of interaction is a lot of fun. So Quasi is out, main stage, and when we're interacting with these people, inevitably the question is, how does this work? Like, seriously, I'm talking to a robot. Like, this is not normal, and that's kind of our goal, right? So we hear phrases like, oh man behind the curtain, or Wizard of Oz, and all of those things, and actually we don't care. That's really not our point. And so when that typically happens, we'll actually invite the kids or mom and dad behind the curtain, and they actually get to see how it works. So this is an interesting opportunity to show them the technology. And so if it's a little kid, we actually hand them the headphones. They get to speak into the mic and become Quasi's voice, and they get to puppeteer Quasi to their friends who are still out front. So it's kind of an empowering experience also. So yeah, we built Quasi, the puppeteer version, and we were asked why. Like, why did you do this? And so our reasoning became, we wanted to create this magical experience that was unique. So every time they came back, it would be a customized experience as they came back. So you might talk to Quasi early on in the day, go walk around, come back and tell Quasi about the experiences that you had. And hopefully, if it's the same puppeteer, or if my memory serves me right, we can pick up that conversation. So we just wanted to create an experience where kids are going to go home, tell their friends about it, and then they'll want to do Quasi. So the rewards were unexpected, and this was huge for me, at least, as a puppeteer. So we spent a lot of time working on the technology, and that was fun and cool, but the rewards were interesting. I'll just mention one story, and there's a bunch. But we were, a few years ago, we were at an event over at the Carnegie Science Center, and it was a robot theme, so Quasi was there interacting with the kids. And typically, an interaction is usually about 2 to 5 minutes, maybe something like that. So the kids will come up, they'll usually be like, hi, I'm Quasi, and the little girl or little boy will say their name. And then they'll say, how old are you? And just kind of quick exchange, and then mom and dad will usually say, okay, and then they move on. Well, sometimes kids will stay, and that's fine, it's totally cool, but they'll stay a long time. And so this was actually happening with this little boy, and all the while I was talking with him, he was writing down, like drawing things in his sketchbook and writing stuff, and I didn't really think anything of it. Quasi didn't think anything of it. They leave and they come back a little while later, and the little boy had brought his drawings to show Quasi what he had seen around the building. And that happens in other cases, like Quasi gets weird gifts all the time. But as we were catching up on the little boy's day, he was showing me his stuff, and I found out later on that all the while I was talking to Quasi, the mom was standing off to the side. And she just was watching the whole time. And at one point, she turned, and my wife was there, and she turned to my wife with tears in her eyes, and she said, this doesn't happen. My son has autism. And there's something about Quasi that is connecting with him that he can't connect with normal people. And Merrick mentioned something like that earlier, and I completely agree that there's something about characters like this and their simplicity that really nail it for kids like that. So I was floored when I heard this. So that's just one small reward. The challenge, I guess, in talking about this with you guys is we were asked why a series of times, and ours kind of evolved over time. We didn't really have a solid reason for doing exactly what we were doing, but it kind of became this thing. And I would say now, our reasoning for doing this stuff is to break down barriers of communication, to, again, we still want to create magic, but we also want to empower kids or other people that might not be able to. And we just happen to be using a robot for this. So my challenge is, why are you guys doing what you do, right? So there might be a special project that we might be focusing on technology, but ultimately be focusing on what you can deliver or they can take with them. So I've got a couple things, and here's kind of our whys. We wanted to create something out of the ordinary. So again, along that idea of the plussing thing, we wanted to create something out of the ordinary. Normally you don't walk into a room and talk to a robot. And if you do, it's usually an awkward experience, but we wanted to create as much of a natural feeling of that as possible. It just so happens that the puppeteering was the simplest approach, and that has been the most successful decision we made on Quasi. It's nothing groundbreaking, it's a super puppet, that's all it is. But it worked out well for us. Fun enables. I think Jesse actually mentioned this a little bit. We are creating an experience that creates interest in specific things. And so we get to talk to kids, like Quasi is this robot, but he gets to talk to kids about how he was made, and that can tie them into a bit of the edutainment, like in engineering or programming, things like that. And lastly, that personalization. So we are creating this experience that you have with this robot. And it's only yours. And you can come back and you can carry on that conversation. It's just like we do every day with real people. So again, that's just an example of creating an experience with a character. We used a robot. I'm interested to hear what you guys do with whatever you do. Thanks a lot.